We are live. Welcome to Open Minded. I'm Pete. With me is Zach, as always.
Hello.
And today we're going to be talking about what is human consciousness.
They're bringing drugs. They're bringing crime.
Like, the interesting thing is the houses you see around you are all solar houses.
21st Century Fox has been holding talks to sell most of the company to Walt Disney.
I love this subject.
I know you do. So what is human consciousness? Because it's a debate among many scholars. It's something that I feel like we're never going to be able to answer. So why are we even talking about it?
I don't know, because I have some ideas. I think maybe it could be just the result of a bunch of chemical reactions going on in our head.
I mean, I think that's very plausible. I feel like that's like the most scientific and logical approach to what consciousness is.
Yeah, but it still doesn't tackle the what does it mean to even be conscious? You know, that's a subject too. Like, does it even mean anything to be aware that you're aware of stuff? Or is that even nothing to brag about?
Sometimes I feel like ignorance is bliss. Like, I look at my dog and he's so happy all the time, and I'm like, man, I wish that I knew as much as him. I wish I didn't know everything about all the shit that I know about, because it's depressing.
Yeah. Did
knowing
you
about the
know?
world.
Do you know what the only thing happier than a three-legged dog is?
A four-legged dog?
Yeah.
But the three-legged dog doesn't even know that it has three legs.
Exactly. It doesn't even
different.
care. You know, it's just as happy with, basically four legs.
I mean, it might have a little bit harder time walking around. As long as it's not in pain, it's just as happy as a four-legged dog. And
Yeah.
and that's the thing. Like, we talk about consciousness and we talk about human consciousness, but what about dogs? Do they have a consciousness, or is it just like instinct? Do they think? Because sometimes I see my dog like looking at the trash, and then I say, don't do it, and then he looks at me, and then he looks back at the trash, and then I'm like, don't do it, and then he looks at me, and then he looks back at the trash, and then he goes and he picks something out of the trash. So it's like he had to be contemplating that in his head, like, what's the worst thing that could happen if I just ignored him and told him to fuck off?
Yeah. But then what's different from their consciousness? What is chemically and physically happening that's different in a dog's brain than what's happening in a human's brain? And I don't think there is a difference. I think we're just, I don't know, we have a different designed brain, and it could do something different. But
that is what you're saying.
Still using the same. No,
methods.
it's still using the same methods. Like, oxygen, it's made out of basically the same thing. There's nothing different about the brain except for this house is different from my neighbor's house, but it's the same exact, materials and all that shit. Yeah.
Well, I think that you're wrong in a sense that our brain has evolved and has different areas like that dogs don't have. Just like our brain has, our brain and a chimpanzee's brain is like almost identical, except for we have an extra zone that can actually, solve problems better and think about ourselves thinking and have this consciousness, be able to think about life in a different way as just like, well, we have to follow these instincts and do this thing. Like, I think about it all the time. Like, I feel like life is pointless sometimes because we are just a super evolved, primate that can think much better than the ones living in the trees. It's like, what's the point of all of it, though? But the fact that I can actually think of that, it means I have a consciousness above a chimpanzee.
Yeah, but I think the point of it all is to sort of pick who you want to share your consciousness with, and then make an offspring that is basically your consciousness and the
Living
person's and the person you picked to live on.
But animals, the way they do that is differently. They just want to spread their physical genes, not their mental genes. Or maybe it has to do with their mental genes too, because the smarter and more adaptive an animal is, the more likely it is going to be like to survive.
Well, maybe they're not trying to do it that way. Maybe they're not even trying. Maybe they don't even really know what they're doing when it comes to breeding. Everything's just a reaction to a thing. Yeah.
Whereas we have like sexual instincts, which I think are rooted in the fact that we are animals, and animals have a need to breed and survive, and pass on their genes, especially the smarter and more adaptive animals. So that's where that roots from. But then we also have, other needs that animals don't have fetishes, but we think about sex not only as a breeding thing, but also as like pleasure. And
would a bird flaunting its feathers, would that be like considered like a feather fetish in a certain way for a bird? I don't know.
Yeah, but
maybe.
but that's the norm. That's what they all do. So it's not a fetish. If all the birds flaunt their feathers, but then one bird fucking has something like a branch sticking out of its ass, and he's like, "This is what gets me off. I don't care about feathers. Just stick a branch up my ass." Now that would be a fetish.
Yeah.
That's how they attract, like the way human beings attract another person is through their personality, through the amount of money that they make, how they can support either financially or physically, or with security their
looks.
Their looks, yeah. But so like that's what that is. When the birds like show off their feathers, they're just saying, "Look how handsome I am, and look how big I can get my chest to ward off enemies." And this other guy's not as big as me, so if you want our offspring to be safe, then you might as well fuck me.
See, that's a thing. That's basically something like you're forced to be conscious of that, because that's the qualities that make a fighter or a person who could defend, would be a person with a big chest and big arms and whatever, generally speaking. That's what you would think evolutionarily we've been taught.
Yeah. That
the bigger, stronger guy who basically might have the same intelligence of you, he's probably going to win,
Yes.
So that's a thing that we have no choice but to be conscious of that. So is consciousness even real? You know what I'm saying? Like we have no ability to change our consciousness other than, like drugs, but that's not really a thing. That's actually just the same exact chemical reactions happening that would happen if it had the drug in it, It's not like we're changing the chemical reaction that would happen if we took drugs. It's the same one that would always happen,
I think the fact that we can choose who we're attracted to. Well, no, okay, that's incorrect. You can't choose who you're attracted to. You're just attracted to somebody for certain reasons because of your own individual personality. But the fact that we have our own individual, I think it has to do with our personality too, because your personalities change over time. You used to like some type of girl.
You could, like a learned thing.
Yes.
But then how are you in control of what you learn?
You're not in control of what you learn, but you are in control of the actions you take once you learn that thing. But people make decisions differently. Some people make decisions with their emotions. Some people make decisions with their brain. Some people make decisions with their dicks. Yeah.
But then, are they in control of those decisions?
Yes, to a certain extent. If they allow themselves to weigh all the decisions evenly and make like a pros and cons list of the responsibilities that you have for that, like the repercussions to making that decision, then I think everybody has an even playing field. But there's a lot of people who don't think like that. They go with their gut, or they go with their emotions, and then that sometimes backfires.
The way I sort of think of it is we can make a decision, but that decision was always going to be the decision that we're going to make.
So, in fact, we don't actually have free will.
Yes, but we can make a decision. but that's the only decision we're ever going to do. Like, no matter what happens, all atoms are basically just following the path of least resistance since the Big Bang. Like, they're all going in the one direction they were ever going to go in. Putting consciousness there, you know, whatever 13, 4, whatever billion years we are later, just adding this thing now, consciousness, it's not going to change the universe. Like, all things are still happening the same way they would always go. So
I don't believe that. I don't believe that, because that's basically saying that there is fate, and that all things happen for a reason, and that you can't change the outcome. You can't change the outcome of your own destiny.
It's not that things happen for a reason. It's that these things were just always going to happen. It's not like, you know, thank God Earth has oxygen, or else we wouldn't be able to breathe. It's like, no, we evolved to live on a planet with oxygen, or else we would not be humans, you know?
Yeah.
Like, that's what I feel about that. Like, it's not things happen for a reason. It's not fate. It's just that that's the only thing that was ever going to happen. I mean, the Big Bang happened, and just because humans on Earth can think doesn't change the way the universe works since the Big Bang.
Yeah, but then that would kind of mean that we don't have consciousness, because how can you have consciousness and not have free will?
Well, that's what I'm saying.
The idea of consciousness is the fact that we can choose what we do with our lives, and that gives us free will. So
I think it's more like a movie.
If we don't have free will, then we don't have consciousness.
It's more like a movie. You could watch the movie, but it'll never change. That's what we're doing. We're conscious of a series of events that are happening within our thing that we're encased our consciousness in. Like I just scratched my leg. Like, there was nothing on my leg. It was just like this imaginary itch that my brain did, and I had no control over it, and I just had to itch it, you know? It's not a real thing that made me itch.
It was a reaction. It was an instinct that
exactly
evolved over
that I
time.
have no control over.
Yes, but the fact that we're making this podcast episode, we weren't like it took a lot of work to get to this point where we're actually online making an episode, and we could have easily just been like, fuck it, and continue just playing video games, but we worked and we made the conscious decision to do this, and it wouldn't have happened without both of our brains working toward a goal. And that goal is not going to just manifest out of nothing. The decisions that we make from between now and the future, some of them will be unconscious decisions, like scratching your leg, or even like if you're in the car driving home, like you might just zone out and all of a sudden you're like, oh, I'm home. That was an unconscious drive.
That's a weird thing with consciousness, that those zoning outs with driving. Like, there were times when I'd be driving back from Pendleton to Miramar.
Yeah.
And, like, I don't remember the entire ride, you know?
Were you drunk?
The entire ride. Well, maybe hungover or something. But, like, the entire ride, I don't remember. And then I'm at the gate, and I'm like, oh, how did I even get here?
Yeah.
Like, it's insane. And
yeah, but the fact that you can stop and think about that.
That's not being conscious of it. I was actually conscious of, like, thinking about movies and whatever the fuck was going on while I'm driving. I'm not actually conscious of driving.
That's your brain making noise. But you're not conscious of the driving, but you are conscious of the fact that you were in an unconscious state for a certain period of time. You stopped and you said, wow, I don't even remember that drive because my mind was somewhere else. But the fact that you were able to question the fact that you don't remember that drive, that you were unconscious during that drive, gives you a consciousness. Whereas dogs don't, say, oh, wow, man, I've been sleeping all day. Maybe I should go do something else. They're just sleeping when they're tired, and then they hear a noise and they're awake. They don't think about what they did 5 minutes ago.
Well, then that's also why I say you can make a decision or a choice, but that was always the choice you were going to do. Like, you are kind of making the choice and the decision at times in your life when you're in control of it, those rare moments, but that's what you were always going to do.
Well, now that idea brings us full circle to another idea that we've talked about, which is multiverse versus universe, or the way that time works. And if that could be true, the decisions you make was always meant for you to make that decision, because the other you in a different universe who's almost identical to you, they were meant to make the opposite decision, and then that's where your universe is split off from that moment in time.
Even if you were to go into that other guy's universe, it's still your consciousness. You would be doing the same exact thing, you know?
Exactly.
Not what he would be doing. It's not the universe, it's you as a person.
So,
because we're talking about consciousness, not about time travel.
Yeah. But what makes our consciousness different than an animal's? Because we can't sense what they're thinking.
The amount of
this is all speculation.
Maybe it's just the amount of consciousness is the difference.
Yeah, but we can have conversations with primates now, like with sign language. We can talk to our dog and they understand us, and we might understand some body language or gestures, like when a dog scratches at the door, and then looks over at you with these big puppy dog eyes. You're like, oh, he needs to go out. Like, we can communicate with other animals other than ourselves. So what is to say that they don't have a consciousness? Maybe it's just not as advanced as ours.
Well, what was the word I was using? As big or something? They don't have as much consciousness as us.
But do they still have a consciousness? Or are they just living off of instincts?
I would say they do. But
it's
maybe if we're going to talk about maybe the more conscious you become. No, because then you're still in a human brain. It doesn't work that way. Maybe if you made a different brain that was bigger but shaped or whatever the same way a human's was.
Like, what if we merged with technology? We could upload our consciousness into technology. Once a brain gets too big,
it actually gets slower because it has to go from this place to that place. But then it doesn't. That's not also how it works. It works as a web of firing. So,
What happens if we merge with technology and we're able to upload our consciousness into a computer program? Would that still be us? Is that still our consciousness, or is it a copy? Because when you take something from your desktop,
I think a copy is still a copy. Like a copy, I would be fine if someone made a copy of me every time I died. I would be fine with it.
Like an altered carbon?
Yeah, I would be fine with that. Because that is me, just
would it
as
be
much
like
as
you
me
were just
me.
asleep and you woke up? Like, or would your consciousness end and then another consciousness that still remembers all the things that you remember, but you yourself are not, like, yours would just end?
Well,
like
it would be like Groundhog's Day, the movie, where he's aware of these things, but then wakes up, but he's not aware, like everybody else. That's what it would be like. You just wake up in the last place you downloaded your shit.
Such a crazy idea, consciousness. Now, I know some people, not necessarily me, I'm not a very religious person, but some people would say consciousness is your soul, and therefore, like, it's not just a chemical reaction in the brain, but it is actually your soul that it lives inside of your body, which is just a vessel for your soul. And when you die, your consciousness will go to heaven or wherever it may go after you die. Now that brings a whole nother, like, kind of, to me, supernatural idea of what consciousness is, because we are not able to sense what happens after you die to your consciousness. Does it just fizzle out and die? Like, if it were the way we were talking about it up until now, the way it was just a chemical reaction in your brain, once you die, your consciousness would just fizzle out and cease to exist. But in a religious standpoint, if you die, your consciousness will leave your body and go somewhere else, whether it's into a tree or a butterfly or to heaven or to hell or to an alternate universe where you're born immediately as another human being and don't remember anything. Like, it adds so many more layers when you think about it from a religious standpoint, but it also makes it much more interesting.
The way I would describe dying, it's like going back to right before you were born.
Yeah, I don't remember that.
Yeah, because there was nothing, That's exactly what dying is. It's basically you dying is the universe going back to a state of normality more, Like, for most of the universe, you didn't exist, and then you did for a little bit, and then the rest of the universe, you don't exist again. It's like the universe going back to normal.
Yeah, but our tiny brains cannot fathom the idea of not existing, because all we've ever known since the moment we could think about existing is existing. We don't know.
Yes, we wouldn't be able to fathom it, but we could describe it maybe.
I can't describe it. Thinking about it makes me uncomfortable.
Well, I
Thinking
just
about
did
that
describe it.
everything's
It would
gonna
be like
end,
not
and
being
then
born.
yeah,
Or
everything will
be
end,
like
and then
before you
nothing will. And
Just
then
not
nothing.
you being there. It's crazy.
It is.
Because consciousness does, like, would you be conscious of the same things if you didn't eat for a week?
No.
Your consciousness would fade, you'd like be blacking out and all these things, because your consciousness exists because of your brain. And once your brain isn't firing anymore, you just don't have a consciousness and exist anymore.
Like people who've been pronounced dead for longer than 2 minutes, their brain can't get blood and therefore starts deteriorating, and
Yeah.
even if they are resuscitated, they're in a
brain
vegetable
damage.
state because their consciousness has slowly deteriorated away. Or
Yes.
people who have Alzheimer's disease or dementia, their
Yes.
consciousness is slowly deteriorating,
Yeah.
and they can't remember the thing. And if you can't
Because
remember,
your consciousness is only, like, but then people be like, that's my mom. Physically, yes, it is your mom, but not mentally. Like, if you're going to say a soul is consciousness, then her soul has left the body. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Because she's not that conscious. She's not that person anymore.
Well, what about the person? There was a kid, I think he was like 16, and he was in a coma for like 3 or 5 years, and he was conscious during the whole time, and he could hear his family arguing about whether or not to pull the plug. And then one day he just woke up, and he says, I heard everything. Like, what? Like, that's the scariest thing in my mind, because I couldn't imagine being in a vegetative state for 5 years, not being able to tell anyone to kill you, or listening to people who are trying to kill you, and you're like, wait a second, I'm still alive, I'm in here, I just can't move my body.
But yeah, then
like,
maybe
he woke
you're
up.
being stuck in a vegetative state, but being conscious. Maybe he was like, yes, please, just do it, just do it, just do it. I don't want to be like this forever.
Well, that makes me think that there might be a soul of some sort, because if his body, like his, I don't know, maybe.
It could have just been a weird brain thing to where, you know, his brain was awake, but there was a lack of connection to control bodily
His body.
functions or something.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm not religious, but thinking about the fact that everything is pointless, because after you die there will be nothing other than.
Well, you still make your imprint. You
Yeah.
will be dead, but your imprint is still there.
Yeah, and the things that you do actually will matter, because it'll help shape other people's lives. You don't have to be religious to have like a good moral life.
Mm-hmm.
It actually makes not being unreligious the way that you and I are actually makes life feel more important and fleeting, because after you die, once you get to a certain point, you no longer exist. So
Yeah.
you have to make your mark while you do exist, or else it will all be for nothing.
Mm-hmm. The
Man.
only time I'm alive is right now.
Consciousness is weird, man.
Yeah, but going back to what we were saying, I still think consciousness is just the result of chemical reactions going on in our brain and our body, because your gut bacteria also changes your consciousness and makes you think different things. Like if you're hungry, you're thinking about food. Your consciousness fades because it's all related to your brain.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure people will be arguing about this for centuries to come. I think
Yeah.
that we maybe touched on enough. I'm getting kind of depressed, but also hopeful, because we had the conversation, which means we have consciousness.
And hopefully we'll maybe even bring up this subject again. Someone else disagrees with it enough and has some good points, we'll get you on here and do that.
Yeah. Let us know if you have any additions to this conversation, if you want to hear it again. If you make a strong enough argument, we might even call you up and have you be a guest on our show. So email us at openmindedepisodes@gmail.com and have a dandy, diddly dandy day.
Diddly dandy day.